Welcome back. My name is Yana the Heretic, and this is my channel, The Unpopular Opinion Becoming Popular. This time around, I'm going to be talking about Gate 36. This is called the Gate of Crisis. It is in the emotional center, and the keynote is called the Darkening of the Light. This is a direct link to our throat, so it is a very creative channel. If you look at the rave graph, you'll see actually gate 30 and gate 36 flowing into the same circuit, which is called the sensing circuit. And that is why it's so ultimately creative. This is the gate of crisis in our emotional center because it is something that is meant to really transform us in a direction that gives us a lot of experience, and therefore it holds a lot of expectation of what's going to be on the other end of this experience. And that is why it's called the crisis, because it's really difficult to make a transformational change, a profound one. So it's going to take a lot of courage to embrace the fact that things might not go the way that you want them to be. And it's all about emotional turmoil because it stretches us in this emotional field to embrace the highs and lows, the pain and hope that happens in our lifetime. So the darkening of the light can seem really harsh. This was filtering March 5th or March 12th through the 17th. And under the Godhead Mitra, which is about, the guardian of honesty, friendship, and covenants. So this is a revolving door of emotional experience between others, between, things that happen in our day-to-day, the things that we cannot control. I wrote, when the plates of the earth are shaking, will you allow yourself to fall between the cracks? Or will you find the initiatic will to witness the turbulence and brave its tumultuous winding? After all, it is very boring, exhausting, especially with people at this gate, to experience the same thing over and over and over again, because you know what's on the other end of that experience. It doesn't really hold that emotional charge. It doesn't hold that same sentiment with you. And a lot of people are okay with the same emotions. They build this foundation. They, have their friend group. They feel comfortable in this social web that they've created, and they stay there. And this is the people that, never travel far after high school, and they're there for the reunion, and you're like, holy shit, you're looking around and everyone's like stayed put. And then some people have completely expanded into different people. This emotional crisis is born from fear, both the fear of change and the fear that change will never happen. So there's this back and forth push and pull of, oh shit, like, am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? What's going to be going down, if I move, if I abruptly change my life? How do you change your environment when the people you love never want to leave your place of birth? That's a really difficult thing. You don't want to be away from your family. There's a lot of factors that could happen, and you're like, well, I'm going to leave the nest, and your parents, like, maybe they're traditional in some aspect and they want to keep you close. And this doesn't really work well with gate 36s because they're meant to expand and go through, oh, well, I really miss home. I'm homesick, so you have to realize the things that you left behind in order to come back to them and be like, wow, I really appreciate that this exists here, and I can always come back to home, and it's always memorable. And there's some situations that will never be the same. You know, like you're there for that moment of like everything's like a hype. You know, I like to call this hypnosis, where it's hypnosis and psychosis together, or sorry, hype and psychosis together, where it creates this hyposis. So it's like you're really there for the moments that things are really buzzing, and you know it's hard because things change and you're like, well shit, like this whole society, you know, that was here has now changed, you know. And I definitely witnessed that back home, where, you know, there was a lot of fires in Grass Valley, California, and it really started to alter, you know, the drought started to alter the way that people showed up. Everyone was in disarray. And we definitely see that now, right? We have a bunch of crisis happening around us, whether it's political or the AI crisis, or, you know, how much water are we going to have? You know, like this is like the things that you're like, well, what do I do? What role do I step in? You know, this is the quarter of initiation. So like, how do I initiate myself to be in the right place at the right time? And if you're emotionally wired, you know, you have an emotional authority, you do have to go through, you know, this wave and make sure that you're feeling good about, you know, the choices you're making. You're ready for them because you're not coming from a dark emotional place. You're initiating yourself from a place where you're like, yes, this is absolutely what's going to happen, and I feel ready for it. So that's the healthy 36. That's the healthy emotional center. And, you know, I personally myself, like, felt like it's either change or die, you know, and expand at all costs, or else my consciousness will fade and I will become a zombie here. You know, this place doesn't have anything for me to stay here for anymore. Do I like go with the grind of dealing with that, or do I just like let myself be free and experience something new, whether or not I have the plan? You know, and that's where the crisis really steps in. You're like, oh shit, I wasn't actually prepared. You know, now I'm like struggling to find a place, struggling to find roommates, you know, and for a lot of my personal life, like I ended up being forced to change my surroundings, you know, and it was either for blatant self-respect or because I ended up costing more than I was worth to people, you know. And I was like definitely a lot more of a damsel in distress, and I know that because of my upbringing and just needing people to step in and help me, you know. And I ended up moving to Washington to start a doom metal project, and getting far the fuck away from, you know, my disrespect for my family and the suffocation I was feeling. And you know, my immunity in that moment was to embrace the harsh realities and embrace the present. And it was really hard, and I was heartbroken a lot, you know, because I was like, well, the only thing I can do is just move forward, you know. I don't know what's on the other end. I don't know how stable the foundation is, but I have to hope that it will happen for me and that the right people will come in. And they did. And those people stay so close to me in my heart. You know, there's people that have saved me from homelessness and, you know, given me a place to shower in the past because, you know, like that's just what happened. I chose to respect myself rather than, you know, embrace and like be dulled down, like my whole personality, my whole life force to be dulled down, you know, to a freaking smooth concrete surface and no texture is not fun. So I know that I had several crutches to self-medicate, and I felt like my Muladhara chakra really took a fucking blow. And, you know, that is your root chakra. I had a wheelhouse of alternative therapies that I've learned throughout my life. It's been, you know, over a decade of me learning alternative therapies and taking on these tools. And I do feel that, you know, after my skull was like full of terpenes and I did Ashtanga yoga and like balanced myself in like all of this turbulence, I really learned how to embrace this crisis. You know, I know that some of it was a crutch and some of it was actually really positive balance in my life that helped me take on more stressful situations. So I'm sure that other people who have this gate don't go through such sudden destabilization in their environment like I did, but you definitely have that pull, that pulse, you know, in your emotional cavity where you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna like cut off all my hair, or like, fuck it, I'm just gonna like, you know, sell all my things and go to Fiji or something, you know, and you don't really know what's on the other end. Maybe you come back and you're like, holy shit, like I've spent all my money. What do I do now? You know, and like, that's the kind of thing that can be extremely heavy to bear. So it is really important to take on, you know, this darkening of the light, which is actually not a bad thing. It's a alchemical term for turning inward and being able to take something that's really stressful and to like soften it and to really see like, okay, like if I am calm, you know, I have these options floating around, or I took on something that didn't end up the way I wanted. Like, how do I show up with strength and dedication to, you know, really getting myself to the place I want to be? And to show up for the damage, or to show up for the new initiatory experience you could be having. So it's all about kind of meditating in that, you know, like, and calming your nervous system down and going inward and like perceiving like, okay, like if the earth is shaking around me, like how am I going to leap from one plate to another? You know, what's going to get me out of this? And seeing that with clarity and with like really balanced emotions is what's going to get you through it. And sometimes it's amazing. It's like you learn so much about yourself and your capability and your strength, your wisdom, your ability to commune with people that are not like you at all, to actually embrace, like, you know, being a hitchhiker, for example. You know, this is a perfect 36 sort of gate, you know, where it's like, okay, am I going to sit in this car with this person? Is this the right person that I should, you know, trust? And just being able to gauge that within yourself, that is considered experience. And it's really, honestly, the most beautiful thing, because, you know, when I was hitchhiking, I did find the right people, and it was like a godsend, you know, where you're like, wow, I feel really supported by the universe in this present moment. It's the same thing as like being present in life, where, you know, when you're riding a dirt bike, you have to be absolutely sharp and like go for it. You have to full send, you know, skateboarding, full send, you know, or else your thoughts and your stress is going to make you fall and make you hurt yourself, you know, and that can take a lot of time to heal. So it's about, you know, learning how to keep your composure under stress. And yeah, the higher frequency of this gate is all about showing up as your best or higher self. You know, even though you may have chosen wrong, you can learn from the experience. There's always a silver lining out there. Recently I decided that the risk that I was playing over in my head was not worth it, because how much destabilization has happened for me in my life. I wanted to fight for my relationship, for monogamy, you know, and that's the other aspect of this. Like, if you have gate 35, which gate 35 is the polar to gate 36, it's the gate of change. So, and together they make the channel of transitoriness, which is called the jack of all trades. So having this channel, personally, I've seen how my desires, you know, having also gate 30, like, I've realized that my desires were making the changes for me, but, you know, the conclusion of those desires were, like, I hurt people, you know, and this can be also, like, wanting to perceive new partnerships all the time, and, you know, going from one emotional thing to another with, like, people, or, you know, and I used to be polyamorous, you know, and I just realized that everything that I've been building is the things that I have really wanted. And I want to work through these challenges with my partnership. And, you know, it's really the right choice that I could have made, you know. You know, I almost had to witness myself leaving behind everything that I had really built, like this home, this nest, you know, and the potential of making this garden happen. And, like, that would increase my knowledge 20-fold about plants and herbs. And, you know, there's medicinal herbs in my yard. So, you know, I think that potentially having gate 35 not be a part of this transit was probably for the best for a lot of us, you know, because the abrupt change comes from this, like, spontaneous combustion that happens, and then you're like, oh fuck, like, I really bombed my life and broke these bonds, and, like, now people are hurt and I don't think I can go backwards. There's nowhere to go. It's like going through, you know, a portal, and you're, like, looking back and the door's gone. Like, the entire freaking landscape of your previous area is gone, and you're like, oh shit, you know, I'm here now. Who do I know? The pressure for immediate change is always lurking, though. You know, it's waiting for its moment to poke and prod and test you. And anxiously existing in the future and never sitting in the present is where discipline doesn't happen. You know, you don't have the ability for discipline to carve its course throughout your muscle memory. You know, my foundation, even though I'm so proud of being a jack of all trades, it's still like, what do I have to show for? You know, yeah, I know how to piece together this web of things I can do, but at the same time, like, you know, when is my time to shine with, like, this one skill, you know, or this multiplicity of skills to come together and become this masterpiece, which involves all of these skills that I have taught myself and learned throughout my experiences. It's definitely an uneasy, you know, feeling of transformation. You know, it's like, does something always have to be altered for me to get that adrenaline hit, that dopamine hit? But shit, you know, I, like, deserve to see myself complete something. You know, not all my efforts are going to just decay and never exposed to the public eye with prowess. Because if your life keeps changing and you keep abruptly moving, you never get to finish anything with those groups of people. You never get to, really finish that project because you're like, holy shit, like I'm giving up basically with my actions. And, or people are giving up on you because you're like, holy shit, you have like way too much energy and like you're chaotic, So there must be a way to clear that out and stop this loop of suffering, So you're gonna weigh out the situation appropriately before you make an emotional choice that only benefits the sad victim, the lonely person inside of you. No matter what the cost, I definitely feel like the way that my life has been has really shown me the quality of people that are in my life today. The only thing that changes for me now is how I, identify with my style, how I evolve, my wisdom, and the material I focus my energy on. There's enough going on in America for me to not like jump onto like destabilizing myself. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. There's a lot of external crisis. So my internal crisis is not coming online, which is that adrenaline hit of changing your entire life. There's so much to be done in the economy and the resources that you are obtaining day to day, and preparing for. Like really being on the mark with the changes that are going on. Investing your time, your money, your energy into what's changing externally. That's where I feel like this gate is really, starting to reverberate in our ethereal plane. So, yeah. The proper use of strategy and authority will get you through it. Don't worry if you have this crazy gate. It's only crazy because of the name and, planning out your future, making solid plans. You can learn from people that do so. I'm very much not that person that like is like, oh, well, I ended my job, and I already have another job lined up. Like I could benefit from that, but that's not been me necessarily at all times. And it's nice to like be on the cross of planning, where you're like, yeah, like I'm planning my whole future and like this is how I'm going to shift into it without having to feel like everything is on this rocky foundation and I'm going to therefore have to like witness myself escaping this crazy mountain with loose gravel and rocks, and making sure that, you ground yourselves while decision making. That's the ultimate power flex here. Assess where you are at emotionally. Don't make abrupt changes. At least try. It's difficult when you're a creative, emotional being and you just feel you're suffering and you just want to change things so badly. But I know that a lot of us will suddenly shift into this quantum like understanding of how this gate gauges us into change and transformation and taking positive, great risks instead of ones that eventually, feel pitless and rocky. Regardless, this is the functionality of this gate. We're meant to go through emotional experiences and all of the flavors of them. And that does make us extremely wise. It makes us extremely capable. People will say it's character building. That's just the new phrase. So that's what it is, if you will. The other channels in this transit were 4037, that is a common one. That is the channel of community, the bargain. The channel of recognition is about being in the state of joy and dreaming up your future. And leveling your nervousness so composure exists. And the channel of initiation, which is like bing, 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 the like ultimate one for this quarter. The questions of the week are, what seemed like a crisis to you within this transit? Was it fear of movement? Was it the fear of boredom? Decipher all that has changed internally and externally for you since the start of the quarter of initiation. That was February 1st. So assess what's happened in your life since February 1st. How much change have you been through? We have all reached this midpoint of our initiation. This March 12th was the midpoint of this quarter. When you change up your routine, your habitat, and social groups, is it usually because of an issue arising, like bonds being broken? Or did you make a thorough plan for change? Just like maybe tally up how changes happened for you. Was it mostly because of you doing something? Was it mostly because others were doing something? It's a really potent thing to look at and be real with yourself about. How often has spontaneous change led to serendipitous results? So serendipity is the ultimate power flex at the end of this gate. How often have you proved your strength, flexibility, resilience when things do not turn out how you expected? Super powerful stuff. Thank you for watching, for listening, for tuning in. And my name is Yana the Heretic. I will see you in the next gate.